Hello, everybody. I'm Skip Elsheimer, and welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films from my collection at AV Geeks or from other collectors who we've been scanning their materials. I should just say before we get started, I just put a link in the comments to a interview that was done by Mitch Hampton, who's one of the people who actually tunes in. And Mitch and I just did a deep dive and started talking about stuff related to films, etc. I'm going to mute myself on this other computer that I have next to me. So also an apology. Yesterday I showed a film called Targets because I thought it was a drinking and driving film. It turned out to be a film about victims, teenage victims, and what to do about it. So it could have been triggering because it talked about lots of things that trouble adults who experience things as teens. And then also it had like a shot of like teenagers holding targets, which is a little... it's problematic these last couple of days, so I apologize for that. We watch things. It's a film I'd not seen before, so I only watched the first couple of minutes of it before, So, anyways, that was a little tone deaf of me. So hopefully this next film that we're going to watch on the telecine won't have that type of triggering in it, but it's about drug abuse. So we'll see. Anyways, it's called Choices. Enjoy. So it's actually choice, not choices. I got that wrong. You only have one choice. Uh, I gotta say, this is like that. All those other films about pollution that I've seen that came out around the same time, where you have beautiful, idyllic scenes of nature and the beauty of nature. Then it begins to be intercut with footage of litter and trash dumps, and it's the same thing. It's really, and it's, there's no narration. It's yeah, I think it's a little lazy, very lazy. And I'm sure this didn't impact anybody who thought about it. Basically people who are using drugs probably are not worried about being in the shadows and grainy and all solarized. But anyways, yeah, drug films. So my dad used to be a drug educator, and so I got to hear his message, and he actually showed films in my class. Like that's, and they weren't the scare films; they were the more get high on life films. So this would be something he would probably show, but still. All right, this next film, let's figure out what this is trying to teach us. This came from my friends in Houston, Elizabeth and Paul Nelson, who used to do screenings under the name Cinema Bomar. And yeah, let's just see what this film, if this is an educational film in its truest sense. Enjoy. So if you see behind me, I'm rewinding the film Choice that we just saw. Yeah, so that was a short 16 millimeter film that was probably shown. Probably you could purchase it if you were a collector, maybe in the back of a magazine or something, a Police Gazette or something like that. This is a kind of a light. I would call it a girly reel, even though there's men in it. And there's different levels of this, of like beautiful people parading in front of the camera in different stages of undress from this time period. So, yeah, a little bit of eye candy for you. All right. Let's go to Banana Land. Get on board.
Each plant bears only a single bunch of bananas. Bananas are harvested the year round. The men usually work in teams of 3. One is called a cutter. And here is a team starting out to work. The cutter uses a sharp-edged tool on the end of a pole. As the plant bends, The bunch comes down on the shoulder of another man who is called a backer. Each bunch weighs from 50 to 75 pounds. When a man has to carry this load on his back, it is easy to understand why he is called a backer. The fruit must be cut at just the right stage of growth. When the bananas are not too fat, the bunch is made up of clusters called hands. Each hand has from 12 to 20 bananas, and each bunch has from 6 to 14 hands. Now, how many bananas are in the bunch? The bunches are laid carefully on padding to keep them from being bruised. Rough handling at this point leaves bruise marks on the tender fruit. The whole operation, right from the first cutting, is planned and timed. For from the moment the truck arrives to start the bananas on their way to you, everything runs on schedule. Even as the bananas are loaded for the first stage of their journey, a ship of the Great White Fleet is on its way, scheduled to make port at the same time the bananas arrive from the plantation. Notice how padding is placed over the bunches at all times to protect them from the sun, to keep them from being scarred by rough handling. Here is a tractor trailer on its way to a place on the plantation where each bunch of bananas will be washed and inspected before being loaded into freight cars for the trip down to the coast in the waiting steamship. See how each bunch is dipped several times. Great care is taken to see that the bunches are clean before they leave the plantation. That is their principal food crop. Only a few have their own cattle, and the farmer who owns an ox is a rich man. As you can see, their way of farming is very simple compared to ours. On higher ground, we find the cocoa tree. In Spanish, it is called cacao. Here is a cacao pod. The bean grows in this pod. It is from this bean that we get our cocoa and chocolate. The sharp knife he uses to open the pod is called a machete. Now you've learned another Spanish word. After the cocoa beans are spread out in the sun to dry, they are packed in bags and shipped to countries all over the world. People drink a great deal of cocoa, but Americans drink more coffee. Here are coffee beans being stripped from a bush. Did you know that they look like little red berries? Although we call them coffee beans, they really are seeds that grow inside their red fruit. Coffee is one of the biggest exports of Middle America. Large plantations may have 1 million trees and employ thousands of workers. Coffee grows best on high ground with good drainage and is found only in the tropics. Carts first bring the ripe berries or seeds to drying pits where they're unloaded to dry in the sun. Here is a typical drying plant where coffee beans are spread out in the sun. The outer hulls are removed by washing. Here you see men pushing the beans through a watering trough. This washes away the hulls or outer parchment. When they are thoroughly washed, they are spread out in the sun to dry. After they turn green in the sun, the beans are split, packed into bags, and shipped to coffee roasters all over the world. We all know what happens to coffee after that. Now, huge streams of water being sprayed over a banana plantation is our first introduction to why this rich area is called Banana Land. Banana plants need a great deal of water. In the dry season, they have to be watered in this overhead way. Another method of bringing water to the plants is by surface canals. This is called irrigation. Here is a large banana plantation. And now, before we go any further, let's take a look and see where bananas first came from. Bananas originally came from the moist tropical region of southern Asia. Alexander the Great found them here. In time, banana roots were taken from their original home to the east coast of Africa. From here, the banana was carried westward across Africa by the Arabs. Portuguese explorers before the time of Columbus found them growing here and took them to the Canary Islands off the North African coast. Around the year 1516, Father Tomas de Balanga brought them to the islands of the West Indies and later to the mainland from a place we call Banana Land. Locally. Now the ship is about ready to leave. To afford to have or to buy. Here's how the banana is planted. Holes are dug a foot deep and 15 to 18 feet apart. A banana root or bit looking very much like a tree stump and weighing 3 to 5 pounds.
Uniting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In the 1500s, Spain dreamed of linking her many New World colonies by joining the oceans. Ships might sail from ocean to ocean without making the long voyage around Cape Horn. The place to build a water path. There remained only one way to ship goods by water from east to west, around Cape Horn, a long trip of 3 to 9 months. In the 1800s, the United States began to grow. People and businessmen carry passengers and goods across the Isthmus of Panama to waiting ships, but a better way of crossing the isthmus. In 1881, Ferdinand de Lesseps, the great French engineer, attempted to overcome the problems of building a Panama Canal, were the main block in the path of the proposed canal. De Lesseps' French company planned to cut through with its dread diseases, dense vegetation, and stifling heat and humidity. Here, drink dates. In the early 1900s, this country realized its growing naval and merchant fleets. These historic films of the Canal Zone show how hundreds of workers. Much of this work was supervised by George Washington Goethals, a United States Army engineer. Also important was the contribution of Dr. William Gorgas, who directed the successful fight in overcoming health and sanitation problems. Dr. Gorgas had pools and swamps drained to destroy the mosquitoes that carried deadly yellow fever. The engineers completed the great task of building the canal. In 1915, the first cargo ships went through the canal. Today, the Panama Canal remains a vital link for sea travel between two great oceans. This ship is in one of the locks or steps that make up the canal.
Well, that was weird. So, excuse me, this came from a collector who probably just had this extra footage of Panama and decided they would just, like, we'll just put it on here, on this reel. Because, you know, reels cost money. And I know there were some collections out there and collectors who that's what they would do. They would build these reels of thematically similar clips and for stock footage purposes or for their own filmmaking purposes. And so they have lost their integrity as far as where did that come from? I don't know. And this happens on eBay too, where some people go in and they clip out thematic things because they know that those themes might sell better, especially railroad footage, locomotive footage from home movies. So it's frustrating because you lose the context of where it came from and it makes it hard to research. Like, what is that from? I have no idea. The only way I could be able to find out what that Panamanian film was is like find the actual film and confirm that, oh yes, that indeed is from this Coronet film on Panama. So anyways, that's what we deal with sometimes. All right, I got another film set up on the telecine behind me. I'm going to change the title to, what is it? Critical Driving Patterns. So I missed the alternate pronunciation of machete, but I know that Erwin Moon in the Moody Institute of Science, he in the film about electric eels, he talks about machete. He just says machete. He doesn't say machete. So, yeah, I missed that one. I might have to go and listen to it again to see if we can add it to the list. Okay, so anyways, Critical Driving Patterns. It's missing the title, but hopefully you'll get the gist of it. Enjoy.
A test driver's assignments aren't always easy, but they're designed to prove the car's capabilities under widely varying conditions. Our high-speed track is built for maximum performance and durability tests. Other assignments have us putting a car through its paces under handling conditions. Torturous tests bring out the ruggedness and performance in a car. But out on the highway, we have to cope with additional circumstances that test a driver's ability and bring out the best or the worst in a driver. That's the reason for this assignment, Critical Driving Patterns. We'll be driving under unfavorable conditions, those critical times when good habits pay off. We'll be investigating the value of the decision pattern under adverse driving conditions, and the importance of correctly identifying critical clues to prevent trouble before it begins. To do that, we'll be looking at what happens when our driving pattern is threatened by three things: a sudden loss of vision, steering or braking, even all three at once. On the proving ground, it's not so bad. No traffic to worry about, no real surprises on the track. But what if this happens out on the highway? The situation may become critical. While I couldn't see, my car wheels went off the pavement. That means difficult steering and uneven braking. I need to slow down gradually, staying in position with my right wheels off the pavement. When my speed's down, I check behind for clearance. I then turn sharply back onto the road to get my right wheels over the pavement's edge. No panic, no frantic steering. I knew my positioning in traffic before the unexpected happened. Trouble was, I made a mistake. I short-circuited the decision pattern, missed the critical clue. I failed to realize soon enough that the underpass was flooded. That error made the driving task more difficult. Things happen too fast. What is the basic driving task? How can I explain it? As a driver, I'm usually confronted with 10 or more highway and traffic events each second. At least 2 of these events are relevant to the driving task and will have to be observed each second. A few of these events will require a decision on my part, and these decisions will demand I take some kind of action from 30 to 120 times a minute. If my steering, speed control, and positioning are accurate, conflicts will be avoided. But most drivers make at least one minor driving error every 2 minutes. And a critical error which could lead to this every hour or two. The real expert's critical errors are years apart. The skilled driver minimizes errors and, in turn, the chance of a collision. That's why a habitual decision pattern approach to solving driving problems is important. It'll keep us out of trouble when the unexpected happens. You see, when an unfavorable situation arises and threatens us with an emergency, here's what happens. The initial alert indicating something is wrong, your point of decision, with no time left for steps 2, 3, and 4. The skilled driver does not allow himself to be caught by surprise in the first place. Here's a good example of the initial alert and point of decision crowding up on each other. Regaining control when a skid starts, like knowing how to turn your wheels into a skid, takes experience and a lot of seat-of-the-pants driving. We won't teach you that in this film. The important thing is to know how to prevent a skid. You do that by reading the critical clues that mean there's trouble ahead, and then by making decisions soon enough to minimize the problem. Learn to read the scene. Recognize patterns that provide critical clues indicating braking, steering, or visibility problems. Clues like these. Changes in pavement colorings can mean different coefficients of friction, oil, water, ice. All can produce skids. Shaded areas can mean wet, slippery leaves on the pavement, water, frost, or ice, or hidden gravel. Bridges, overpasses, and underpasses ice up and frost up first, melt last. In winter, snow falling from trees can suddenly blot out the road ahead if it hits and sticks to your windshield. Wet pavements are as slippery as ice. The first of a rain washes oil and road grease to the surface. Water on the road can cause hydroplaning. The wheels, at higher speeds, float on the surface of the water. You can't steer. Dips in the road and underpasses can be flooded. Actions of approaching cars and of cars ahead could have tipped me off in our first example. Few things happen in driving without any warning at all. Critical clues can provide you valuable time and space to adjust your speed and maintain control. On the road, your car takes a beating too. In addition to following the regular maintenance schedule, check for worn tires that lead to flats and blowouts, or that indicate alignment and steering problems. Low, pulling, or squealing brakes that demand immediate attention. And unless you're a service technician, get a pro to give your car a safety check. One defect can lead to another. You have to see danger in order to avoid it. Just as you have to be able to spot critical clues and drive a car that responds properly to cope with their warnings. And there are other factors to help you understand yourself and your condition as a driver. For one reason or another, you're not as sharp some days as you should be. Many factors can influence your driving performance. Inattention, fatigue, boredom, alcohol, drugs. They all can dull your driving edge, lower your skill. In combination, they can kill you. There are even critical clues that you're far from your best. You have difficulty keeping your vehicle in its lane. You find yourself surprised by unexpected situations. You forget your rear view mirror or turn signal. Or you forget you're on high beam. You unconsciously creep up on the car ahead until you have to brake suddenly. That's the time to get out from behind that wheel. Let someone else take over the driving, or just take a break. And even when you think you're fully alert, research has shown that you may still be easily distracted. Are you neglecting the basic rules of strategic positioning in traffic? Are you finding the proper gap for each maneuver you make? Giving the other driver a break when he needs it? Meanwhile, learn to gain for yourself critical time and spacing situation. Spot
little splicey there. So, 1971? You think that's what that was? Seemed like a little bit later in the 70s, but yeah. So there's this amazing series that came out 40s, 50s called Industry on Parade, and it's made by the National Association of Manufacturers. And it's kind of like a newsreel setup, but it excuse me, highlights different things, products, different manufacturing processes, and how it impacts us in our everyday life. And so this is an example of one of those. Industry on Parade. Enjoy.
Who would do this to a beautiful rose garden?
How do water-clear crystals further national defense?
What's the familiar product of this unusual machine?
Why would 1 million women bake a cheesecake?
Industry on Parade. A brand new look at our America. Produced on film each week by the National Association of Manufacturers.
Research headquarters for a company in Newark, New York. Do they look like greenhouses to you? Well, that's what they are. For the company is Jackson & Perkins, a name associated with roses the world over. We're about to see some of the steps that go into the development here of more than 10,000 new varieties of roses each year. Eugene Borner, Director of Research, collects pollen from a rose he intends to cross with another to produce a new hybrid. The pollen is brushed onto the pistil of the second rose. In nature, this job is handled by the wind and by insects who carry the pollen from one flower to another on their wings and feet. But here, it must be known exactly which roses are involved in the cross. To ensure that insects or a stray breeze won't ruin the experiment, a paper bag is placed over the flower. In about 3 months, the plant produces a rose hip or rose apple, which contains the seeds of the newly created hybrid. The seeds are planted in beds called flats. As soon as they produce roots, they're transferred to small flower pots, then into larger and larger pots until they are ready to be brought outside. New varieties that show promise are placed in trial gardens in all parts of the country, so it can be determined how they will do under every climatic condition. Then they're graded according to vigor, appearance of the leaves, size of the flower, fragrance, firmness of the petals, and a dozen other factors. Finally, from the year's production of 10,000 new varieties, top management must make the final decision, must select the 2 or 3 that will be produced in quantity. Theirs is the task of picking the ones that will sell and rejecting the ones that won't. And a mistake here could cost a small fortune. Here's a field of 800,000 bushes, not one of whose blossoms will ever be marketed. They're wild roses, 2 years old, grown to supply a sturdy root system for the hybrids. Budding eyes from the hybrid plants are grafted to the stems of the wild plants. The flowers that will result will have no resemblance whatever to wild roses. Once the new shoot is well established, the top of the wild bush will be cut off and discarded. This not only assures the hybrid of healthy roots, but permits one new plant to produce many additional plants in a single season. One year later, the plants are dug up like this and prepared for market. The plants are bundled, their tops are trimmed, and they're sent off to special storage cellars to await shipment to greenhouses or home gardeners. Time was the firm sold its roses only to big growers who supplied retail florists. But a display the company put on at the New York World's Fair aroused such widespread interest that it went into mail order selling, which now accounts for the major share of its volume of more than 10 million rose bushes a year.
The proper use of this nation's renewable natural resources, soil, water, forests, grass, fish, wildlife, and so on, poses a serious problem for all Americans. Careless waste of such resources can gravely affect our entire future. Federal control over the use of our natural riches should be kept to a minimum. Industry endorses only those practices and programs, whether from local, county, state, or federal sources, that contribute to permanent conservation, sound development, and wise utilization of our resources. The job is mainly one for non-governmental groups. Industry on Parade looks in on a Salt Lake City plant whose major function is dissolving in water crystals of a chemical called ammonium dihydrogen phosphate, then converting the solution back into crystals. The large, optically perfect crystals thus produced are vital to the national defense, and the job of making the big crystals is one that requires 2 months' time here at King Laboratory Incorporated. These particular crystals are going to be used as seeds for the production of other crystals. Control of the temperature in the tanks is the key factor. Insulating blankets around the tanks help the automatic controls gradually bring down the temperature at a pre-controlled rate. The big reason why large, perfect crystals are rarely found in nature is that fluctuating temperatures interrupt their formation. Looking down into the tanks through a glass porthole on top, you see this. The seed crystals rotating back and forth, day and night for 8 long weeks, as layer after layer of clear and symmetrical crystals build up on the seed. Pretty to look at, but as we said, very useful too. For these crystals are piezoelectric. If you compress them, they give off electricity. And if you subject them to electricity, they give off sound. Thus, the vital purpose they will serve is in sonar equipment used by the Navy for sending and receiving sound underwater. Before they can do this, however, they must undergo extensive additional processing. Like a diamond, which is also a crystal incidentally, the ADP, as it's called, must be cut by an expert who follows the plane surfaces and thus leaves a minimum of waste. Now the crystals must be cut down still further into very thin wafers. This little wafer, when brought to exact dimensions, accurate to 1/1000th of an inch, will be the heart of a piece of equipment that permits a naval vessel to detect the presence of submarines and also is vital to the operation of submarines themselves. Through the electrodes being added here, a flow of electricity will cause the crystal to send a burst of sound out through the water, an echoing sound returning from the bottom of the ocean, a school of fish, or any other object nearby will cause the crystal to give off an electrical impulse which activates dials and oscilloscopes and supplies a wealth of information. Wherever the fleet sails, on the water or under it, those little crystals sail with it, helping to keep it safe.
Corrugated boxes weighing mere ounces, being loaded with products of industry weighing many pounds. The boxes will carry their heavy loads safely despite weeks or months of all kinds of rough handling. We've come to accept the ruggedness and shock resistance of corrugated boxes without realizing that they're actually made of paper. At firms like Samuel M. Langston Company in Camden, New Jersey, no one ever forgets that a paper product can be so strong. For it was this company that helped develop this surprising use for paper, and which today, after half a century, is a leading designer and builder of machines used in the manufacture of corrugated paper and associated products. The machines that corrugate paper, or paperboard, are made up in large part of rollers, rollers that will actually do much more than corrugate. They'll apply glue and a paper facing to both sides of the crimped paperboard, for example. Then print trademarks and other information on the outer sides. Cut slots in the boxes so they can be quickly, easily assembled, and do just about everything but assemble the box and put in the contents. This is another of those industries which serve only other industries, one whose products we ourselves may never use or even see, but which contribute much to our way of living because they make the things we do use more convenient and less expensive. To dramatize for visitors to the plant the amazing qualities that their machines can impart to paper, workers here like to stage an occasional demonstration of how much weight even a tomato carton can hold.
America is growing fast. 4 million babies are born every year. That's 11,000 a day, 458 an hour, more than 7 a minute. By 1975, we'll have an estimated population of 220 million. With a population of that size, it means we'll have to create more than 22 million new jobs in the next 2 decades. To add this number of jobs means industry must invest some $264 billion in plant, tools, and equipment. In order to raise this money, we must preserve the incentive to invest and create a fair tax policy to fulfill the promise of the future. A homemaker prepares a new dessert, guided by a recipe in her favorite family magazine. It's strawberry cheesecake, something she's trying her hand at for the first time. She might assume that the recipe was concocted by a famous chef in the employ of the magazine, and some dishes do originate in that manner. But more than likely, the recipe came from a reader just like herself, who developed it by experimenting with an earlier recipe in the hope of giving her family a pleasant surprise. To learn a little about how this recipe got into print, let's visit the magazine's editorial offices. Better Homes and Gardens is put out by Meredith Publishing Company of Des Moines. 90% of the recipes it carries are submitted by readers, and surprisingly enough, those recipes, like everything else printed in the magazine, get a careful going over by the very top editors. Out of hundreds of recipes studied each month, only those that sound downright delicious and practical are sent to be tried out in the magazine's tasting test kitchens. Here in the modern kitchens, 5 home economists are kept busy full-time, baking, broiling, frying, and roasting foods nominated for the honor of being labeled a prize-tested recipe. Products of the kitchens are studied and measured with all kinds of scientific equipment. But this is the most important hurdle of all, the reaction of a tasting panel. Is the cheesecake too bland? What about the color? Do you like the texture? How does it compare with other cheesecake you've eaten? There'll be dozens of similar questions, and only if the answers are preponderantly favorable will the recipe appear in the magazine. Next step, the artwork. This includes drawings and photographs in black and white or full color. A strawberry-filled cornucopia is an appropriate centerpiece to accompany the cheesecake. And finally, after comparable detail work in every department, the magazine goes to press, and tucked away in its pages is the formula for a dessert that an estimated 1 million women will either try out immediately or clip for insertion in their Better Homes and Gardens cookbooks. 1 million cheesecakes. No wonder those people back in Des Moines are so determined that when their handiwork arrives here, the results have got to be good. In this case, it would appear evident they have nothing to worry about whatsoever.
So I was looking up on Wikipedia about when this Industry on Parade was made and why it was made. It was 50s to 1960. Over 500 episodes. It was mostly made for distribution to TV stations, and was really promoting the national. I'm saying a lot, aren't I? The National Association of Manufacturers agenda. So much so that the AFL-CIO took issue with some of their episodes that were decidedly anti-labor and pro-industry and pro-big business. And we saw an example of that talking about the taxation and like, well, taxes, no, whoa, hold on. Don't inhibit growth, taxes. So AFL-CIO supposedly demanded their own public service time on television, and they got it, and that's when they made the Americans at Work series, of which I have shown at least one, a couple of others maybe on some of my shows, the one about barbers, one about bookbinders. So that's its own separate thing, made in response to the popularity of industry on parade. Now, the one thing that troubled me is there was a lot of bad behavior around all that heavy equipment, and we know what to do about that.
I can check that gear in a minute, so don't touch anything, okay?
Get down from there! Now! Hey! Turn it over! What if it bumped that control by accident? You'd be mincemeat by now. What have I told you? You don't work on equipment when the engine's running.
Well, I told him not to touch anything. All right, I guess I wasn't thinking.
You weren't thinking? You mean you'll work on engines and machinery and not think of your own personal safety? Here, shake hands with danger.
Shake hands with danger. Meet a man you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety. Now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. I was young and feisty, never did things by the book. Just let me get my toolbox and I'll take myself a look. I climbed up on a dozier with my mechanic's pride. Said, you can keep it running, friend, while I poke around inside. Shake hands with danger, meet a guy you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety, now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. Although I learned a lesson, I forgot it soon enough. The nicks and burns and scratches showed the young ones I was tough. Till another morning I was grinding on some steel. My other hand got careless and fed my skin into the wheel. Shake hands with danger, step right up and say hello. Grinding wheels and metal are what made me Three-Fingered Joe. I've seen mechanics burning, and I've seen them take a fall, just to save themselves a minute. I've seen them lose it all. I've watched them courting trouble, seen them take a chance and lose. They get careless for a moment and spend a lifetime with the blues. Shake hands with danger. as I used to know. Compared to them, I'm lucky to be just Three-Finger Joe.
Thanks for indulging me there. I see a lot of heavy equipment. I see some shenanigans with some people standing on some sort of thing that's being lowered on cardboard. I think, yeah, they need this film. They need to watch this film. And of course, this was a remix that my wife had commissioned from a singer-songwriter friend of ours, who I might still try to get. He's a school teacher and for a year-round school, and so I need to find him when he tracks out for the holidays, and then maybe have him on. The guy who did the remix. So thanks Alex, thanks Mitch for the coffee. You can buy us coffee at ko-fi.com, coffee.com/avgeeks. Also, the buymeacoffee.com/avgeeks still works, although they are discontinuing PayPal for it, so it's getting harder to use. But thanks everybody for tuning in today. We'll be back again tomorrow, 1 o'clock. We'll watch some more films. It'll be great. You'll love it. Please rewind. Love each other. Take care of yourself. And we'll see you tomorrow.